My name's Oliver. Today we're talking about a blog post that I wrote called Do What You Love Is Backwards. That's right, you heard right. Stay focused, learn to fail. Many young people, myself included, have a hard time trying to figure out what to do with their lives. I'm usually a proponent of try as much as you can until you find something that sticks, but this is much harder to execute in reality than it may initially seem. Changing from thing to thing can often be exhausting, in the same way that just sticking with the first thing you find and end up hating can also be exhausting. So what is the answer? If doing something you hate is exhausting and trying to find something you love is exhausting, what are you supposed to do? I'll give you some of my thoughts, and maybe I'll get you one step closer to figuring out what you want to do with your life. So, why does do what you love suck? I'm going to start with the common wisdom that do what you love is a good idea. So I've been hearing this for quite some time, and after trying to do what I love, I actually think this statement is a little bit backwards. Do what you love is not great advice. Why? Well, if you've ever tried to make a living off a hobby that you enjoy, in the few spare hours you have off work, you'll quickly learn that making money and doing something for fun, for most of us, are two very different worlds. When you try to make money off something you're doing for fun, it can often cease to be fun, and I think this is especially true for creative endeavors. If you're a painter or you make trinkets or cookies in your free time, and you try to mass produce paintings, trinkets, or cookies, you'll soon find yourself burnt out from needing to paint every second of the day in order to keep the demand for your art alive. If you aren't accustomed to the pace of painting all day long, and you don't have a way of continuing to make it interesting for yourself, you may find yourself no longer interested in the thing that you used to find so much joy in. There are those few people in the world who can make a living off of their music or their art or another creative endeavor, but there are thousands and thousands more who are starving artists and who never make it big and who find a hard time staying motivated when times get tough. So unless you have an unrivaled thirst to outpractice, outwork basically every single person on this planet, or some unrivaled business acumen, you might want to consider doing your hobby as a hobby. So why shouldn't you start a business based on do what you love? I spoke in my previous article, Employment versus Self-Employment, about what people overlook when they're starting a business, and I discussed the huge challenges with being self-employed. If you do choose to do what you love as your own business, you need systems in place. You'll spend a lot more time just managing the business than you want, and you'll have to become a jack of many trades rather than being able to focus on your craft because you really are going to be working 24/7 rather than 9 to 5. I see these advertisements for realtor school quite often popping up on my Google ads, presumably because I spend a lot of time looking at houses and economic data. And I always laugh at their tagline, escape your 9 to 5, take control of your own schedule, which loosely translates to, you'll now be working 9 to 9 most days. Oh, and also doing open houses on weekends. And if you're doing the business right, you'll likely be fielding calls and making calls most hours of the day, including when you probably want to be sleeping. So not all that it's cut out to be. You have to try to find new business every day. You'll spend the majority of your time just looking for clients rather than working for them. You can create some amount of balance once you become a little more established. You have a client base, you start delegating and hiring people. But at the start, you will be working your butt off to make ends meet with lackluster results unless you're truly exceptional. It takes people 5 to 10 years before they can slow down a bit and take back some control of their schedule. And some people never manage to do so, so don't say I didn't warn you. How building your skills leads to love. I'm going to talk about the right way to do what you love. Since I mentioned this phrase is backwards, you're probably wondering what I believe the right phrase is. I think it's something along the lines of work hard, learn a skill set, do disciplined practice, become an expert, and finally, love the result. It's so much easier to love something you're good at, that you've practiced at, and that you want to keep pushing the boundaries in. This perspective is not new to me, but it has been reinforced by a few books I've read recently. The first is The Algebra of Wealth by Scott Galloway, which I think is a great introductory finance book and money book in general. The second is Grit by Angela Duckworth. A little late to the party, I know. I think that both of these books' overarching ideas when it comes to a career is focusing on becoming good at the thing that you're doing and reframing failure as something that helps you get better and better. It's supposed to be hard. Often when you're learning something new, it's going to be hard. It's going to suck and you're going to want to quit. In Grit, Duckworth interviews many Olympic swimmers, and one of them says, and I'm paraphrasing, "Honestly, going to practice is hard, and I frequently don't want to go, and I often find myself thinking about quitting." This is an Olympic athlete. She then goes on to say that a top performer attitude is doing the hard thing anyway. You don't want to do it. It sucks. You're thinking about quitting. You still get your ass out of bed and go swim in the fucking pool. They're focused on the top level goal of getting to the Olympics and winning the medals. So what is your Olympics and what is your gold medal? And how much pain are you willing to put aside to do the activities that you need to do in order to succeed? She stresses the importance of finding your one overarching life compass that doesn't change. When it comes to putting in the hard work that is hard to do every day, she stresses the importance of routine. It's much easier to do the hard thing if you have a routine and do it at the same time every day, so you don't have to reconvince yourself to do that hard thing every single time. Just showing up is half the battle. Lastly, the importance of long-term commitment. The good old 10,000 hours or 10 years to become an expert is something that can be hard to remember when you're in the trenches of doing difficult work, but nothing replaces disciplined practice. Probably the most important trait or feeling you need to have towards the work you're trying to do is the desire to be constantly getting better. If you have no drive or grit to improve on the last thing you did, then you'll quickly lose the motivation you need to keep moving. And this is where other people are extremely helpful, and getting quick feedback on what you've done is extremely important as well. You should have a coach or a mentor figure who can help you set goals for disciplined practice and then give you feedback on what you've done so that you can improve quicker. You should also spend some time reflecting on your practice and resting. Don't overdo it every single day. Even Olympic athletes have a daily training limit. If you do all these things and are focused on challenging yourself, building a skill set through putting in multiple reps, getting feedback, and have a compass guiding all of these lower level goals, then you're on the path to eventually loving what you do. So how do you find your life compass? Many people after reading this might say, "That's great, Oliver, but I don't have a compass. And quite frankly, I still have no fucking clue what I want to do." Welcome to the club. There are a few things you can do to try and some questions you can ask yourself to find your compass. Think back to what you enjoyed in high school. This often tends to be the start of people's career discovery phase. Think about things you're generally good at. Ask friends and family if you can't think of anything. And if you're still having trouble, this is where the exploring phase can come in as well. But you have to spend time actually trying things, not just reading about them, which is a trap I very, very frequently fall into. The most important thing, and this is advice I often struggle to follow myself, is to put yourself out there. All of this is hard. All of this is a huge exercise in failure. But if you work through the challenges, learn from your failures, defeat the fear of failure, you don't know till you try, you'll make great progress towards your overarching goal. Failure is awesome. As a side tip from another book, try to reframe failure as being awesome. Like, hell yeah, that was hard as hell. I just fell flat on my face. I'm ready to get out there and do it again. You need to be like a dog that's running after a ball and then crashes into a bunch of trees on the way to the ball, but it still comes back and is ready to go again. You need to have that energy. I think the advice of finding what you love as a function of practice, training, and hard work, rather than simply as a function of do what you love or do what you're interested in, is much sounder advice. In simple terms, I think people should do what they're good at and practice to become an expert. This builds resiliency in children, teaches them to have grit and to not be afraid of failure. Weird how that happens when you get older. I completely understand why many students nowadays are having a hard time unfreezing themselves from paralysis by analysis. They've learned to avoid failure at all costs, and especially with the internet and everyone's lives being online, it can be extremely damaging and unforgiving to fail in public. If you fail a course at school or do poorly on one test, your chances of not getting into the best university could be lost, so the pressure is high. and the consequences of failure are high as well, which is the exact opposite approach we should be teaching. It's good to experiment, it's good to try new things, it's good to iterate, and importantly, one of the best ways to avoid future failure when you need to perform is by failing so many times in private that it's unreasonable you'll be unsuccessful. Par exemple, doing lots of math problems, making hundreds of cold calls, writing lots of songs, or doing lots of paintings. When you get commissioned to do one of those things, you will be an expert and you'll get that stuff done. Failing so much and becoming so good, learning from your mistakes, that when you do put your practice to work, even a bad day will still be a good result. We need to be providing more and more opportunities for students to fail in private, and more importantly, emphasizing that practice is important in every aspect of life. A career is no exception. I believe that failing in public can be a great lesson, but I think too much negative feedback when someone is just starting out can be destructive to the motivation to do that thing in the long run. And it can be hard to come back from too much hate about the path that you want to pursue. Maybe sheltering from some failure is justified, but over time, once you've built the failure muscle in smaller experiments, and you understand that failure is just part of the job, and you decide to give things a go and focus on constant improvement, the negative feedback will become easier and easier to deal with as your competence grows, and funnily enough, your failures might decrease, at which point I encourage constantly pushing the needle to get better and better, and constantly pushing yourself and seeing how far you can go. I strongly believe that if we were to push this kind of advice, rather than do what you love, people would be loving what they're doing a whole lot more, and the generation of directionless young people would have a much easier time finding their direction. That's my preach. That's my speech. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. I hope you found this article interesting, and I hope I was able to inspire myself and everybody else. A lot of these newsletters that I write are pretty much just letters to myself, but I hope that somebody found this interesting or useful besides me, and I hope I inspired you to go out there and stay focused, learn to fail.